All right, well, you've all seen the riots in the UK, spurred on by perhaps misinformation, but also several pressures of, mass immigration and other issues that are going on there in the United Kingdom. But other things have been brought up. Other things have been, reared their ugly heads because of this. And that's what we really want to talk about here. Now, this episode, as I've told you before, I am the new spokesman for Go and Do Travel. I'm very excited about this. I have done several trips with Go and Do Travel. They're a great company. They travel all over the world. If you haven't traveled with numerous other Latter-day Saints on a trip, you need to go and do it. It is a great experience. One of the trips that I do is Egypt. I do it 4 times a year. 2 of the next 4 are sold out. So there's 2 more in March. You can go to CwicMedia.com, go up to trips and events, scroll down to Gospel on the Nile. You won't find more information about the temple than other than in the temple itself, than going to Egypt and seeing the ruins there. Go to QuicMedia.com. Would love to see you in Egypt. Here we go. Now, back to the riots. One of the things that has come up is freedom of speech. And it's kind of like with COVID. When you had COVID and all the kids had to stay home and they started getting the schooling given to them by their teachers over Zoom, and parents were watching what was actually being taught in school, they're like, what in the world is this garbage? Even at BYU, they had everything on Zoom. So you had this library of what some BYU professors and departments were actually teaching. And we've uncovered a lot of that here. Well, these conflicts bring up reactions. And those reactions show you the symptoms of a much sicker West than we may have previously thought. In the UK, this has been going on for several years now, where they have new speech laws, hate speech laws, where if you are online and you say something against what the authorities there feel is proper speech, perhaps it's against a group, perhaps it is a slander, but if so, you are flagged, there's a knock on your door, and you may very well be going to jail. And if not jail, then certainly community service and a flag on your record that sometimes requires a curfew for a long period of time and maybe a fine. But these riots have really brought something out of not only the UK, but of the European Commission, right? The European Union. I've got a letter here from Thierry Breton, the member of the commission, that I'm putting up here. This is from Brussels, August 12th, 2024, so just a few days ago. Dear Mr. Musk, he says, and this is coming from Elon Musk on his own platform on X, talking about what is going on with these riots and talking about free speech. And this is the response. Dear Mr. Musk, I am writing to you in the context of recent events in the United Kingdom and in relation to the planned broadcast on your platform X of a live conversation between a U.S. presidential candidate and yourself. That's a threat to the European Commission, apparently here, bringing Donald Trump on his platform, which will also be accessible to users in the EU. Now, what is the problem there? Right? Users in the EU aren't even voting for Donald Trump, but the EU is trying to wield its power to a U.S. citizen living in the United States who runs a company based in the United States. He goes on, I understand that you are currently doing a stress test of the platform. In this context, I am compelled to remind you of the due diligence obligation set out in the DSA. As the individual entity, he says, ultimately controlling a platform with over 300 million users worldwide, of which one-third in the EU that has been designated as a VLOP here, apparently, a very large online platform. You have the legal obligation to ensure X's compliance with EU law, and in particular the DSA in the EU, the European Union. And then he goes on and tries to fight against Elon Musk's cry for free speech by telling him he is hurting free speech. He says, this notably means ensuring, on one hand, that freedom of expression and of information, including media freedom and pluralism, are effectively protected. And on the other hand, that all proportionate and effective mitigation measures are put in place regarding the amplification of harmful content in connection with relevant events. What's so interesting here is that I can almost guarantee you that Thierry here has not sent out a letter like this talking about harmful content to Facebook or Instagram, to YouTube, and other media platforms that are basically on the left. But man, if you are on the right and you have a platform and you're the owner of it and you lean to the right, you're going to get a warning on hate speech and freedom of speech. And then he goes on and talks about the specifics about being a user on X, as Elon Musk is a user with 190 million followers on his private account, essentially outlining the fact that if you are in another country or you are outside of the European Union, you are still responsible for what you say on these platforms, at least on X. And there has been, of course, the threat of extraditing Elon Musk and others who have commented on X about the riots and about free speech. This is absolute insanity. And here's the last paragraph on here that is really scary, right? It says, my services and I will be extremely vigilant to any evidences that point to breaches of the DSA and will not hesitate to make full use of our toolbox, including by adopting interim measures, who knows what that is, should it be warranted to protect EU citizens from serious harm, right? He's talking about words. So what is this really going to lead to? I mean, you've got international platforms that reach everybody with different rules for each of these countries or unions on free speech, being the United States having the best of all of those with the First Amendment, not yet putting people into jail or fining them for putting memes on X or any other platform. And it's worse than you think. No, it's not fear-mongering, commenters. It's awareness. There are crazy numbers of what the UK has already done, as an example, just in the UK, for jailing people online and what they've said for ridiculous things. There's no incitement of violence. There's no, in some cases, not even something that would be even slanderous in any way. But here you have the EU trying to flex its power across the pond here over to the United States. It's going to be interesting to see how all of that plays out. Freedom of speech being the central issue on these platforms. Here's Konstantin Kisin on what's happened in the UK, right? He is originally a Russian. He is from the UK now. He's speaking with former Prime Minister John Anderson from Australia. Listen to what he has to say here.
Last year, 400 people were arrested for things that they said on social media. 400 people in Russia. Obviously, this country is very different. How many people do you think were arrested in Britain for things they said on social media last year?
Go on.
Take a guess.
I have no idea.
3,300.
Really? Arrested for what they'd said on social media?
Yeah.
Really? What sort of things get you arrested?
Well, one example I give in my show is there was a young woman from Liverpool called Chelsea Russell. Her friend was killed in a car crash, a 19-year-old woman. And she posted the lyrics of his favorite song on her Instagram, the lyrics. And it was a rap song, so the lyrics contained several instances of the N-word.
Okay, so again here, it's think about what this does in controlling speech. The state is supreme. It's going to control what you can express to others. This is the West. Got a meme here of UK police coming. We saw your meme. Step outside, right? Here they are at the porch of a young woman here using force because of a meme. And this is a meme, right? It's a meme of a meme. But there's truth to this. It's happening all the time in the United Kingdom. Now, where should we be on this? What is really interesting to me, and I don't know that everybody catches this. I think most people probably do, or some do. But, the Book of Mormon has a dual, there's several messages, but there is a primary dual message to the Book of Mormon outside of, obviously, another testament of Jesus Christ. But that is that the doctrine of Christ and liberty go hand in hand. They are one and the same thing. You cannot pull them apart. It is not a coincidence that the West is full of democracy and opportunity more than anything the world has ever seen. And its core cultural belief system and worldview is Christianity. Now, we're losing that, certainly, but maybe based on what we're seeing here, we're also losing democracy. We're also losing freedoms. But as you go through the Book of Mormon, you see all of the dissenters, they're all anti-Christ. They all want tyranny now back over the Nephites. As you read Alma and you read about Captain Moroni fighting against Amalickiah and against his brother Amaron that we're going through right now in Come Follow Me, you can't help but see the message that Mormon is putting here about liberty being tied directly to Christianity. Christianity demands and requires liberty because it wants to maximize agency. It wants to, and agency and the law of liberty go hand in hand. And when you think about it, agency is tied directly to the doctrine of Christ, to the atoning sacrifice of Jesus Christ. It is the use of agency, both good and bad, that allows us to lean on the atoning sacrifice of Jesus Christ, to repent and to change and to become. Agency is so important that even when Adam and Eve are faced with the choice and are about to partake of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, God is not going to stop them. He's going to let them play that out. And he lets us all play that out. We all hang on to our own agency so that we have, in a sense, our own identity. Now, Irenaus, or Irenaeus, however you want to pronounce his name, was an early church father. And I believe he was born in around 130 AD, died somewhere in the early 3rd century, 205, 210, somewhere in that area. He's kind of a priesthood grandson to John the Beloved, John the Revelator. John had a disciple named Polycarp, and Polycarp was a martyr. He was killed, put on a stake, burned at the stake. I think he didn't die on the stake, and they had to kill him afterward. But he is the one who ordained Irenaeus. But Irenaeus has some writings called Against Heresies, and in that he's got something he calls the Law of Liberty, which may not be from him originally, but he uses this, and he uses the New Testament to show that God allows for agency. He's not going to make you choose a certain thing. He's quite on the opposite end of things. And Irenaeus gives some great examples of this and reasoning in this. Let me quote this here. He says, God made man free from the beginning, for God never uses force. He placed in man the power of election, even as in the angels. Glory and honor, he says, to all who do good, and it is due them because they could have done evil. In other words, if there was not opposition in all things, as Lehi says, then there's no glory, there's no honor, there's no goodness in choosing good. You're just a puppet. But because there is opposition in all things and you choose good, then there is glory and honor in that because you did not choose the evil. He goes on. Now, if God made some men good and some bad simply by nature, there would be nothing praiseworthy in their virtue or blameworthy in their vice. For that being their nature, they could not do otherwise. So if God made you good, you're really not good. There's nothing praiseworthy about it. If you're not using agency, you're just good. And if he made you bad, then there's nothing that you can really be blamed for because he made you bad. He's showing the importance of agency for each individual and therefore choice, repentance, the atonement, judgment, and exaltation or other kingdoms. He ends the quote here. He ends by saying the following, but since to all is given equally the power of doing good or bad, exactly as they choose, They are rightly praised or blamed for what they do. Judgment matters. That is why the prophets appeal to men to do good and eschew evil. Irenaus. Okay, so really good reasoning behind that. And he calls this the law of liberty. He draws this from, I think it's Matthew 27. In this case, I think Jesus is at the temple, and Joseph Smith talks about this as a temple verse or verses, where he says, "Oh, how many times have I tried to gather you?" I'm paraphrasing here, obviously. "Have I gathered you like a hen, and ye would not?" He's trying to gather us. He's trying to help us to do good, but he doesn't make us. And so the law of liberty is Christianity. The law of liberty has to do with the ability to have your agency. Going back all the way to the war in heaven. What was the issue there? Of course, we oftentimes talk about Lucifer and his desire to remove agency, as we read in the Book of Moses. But on the opposite end of that is the Father's plan, which was focused on agency. So one represents tyranny and one represents agency. And freedom of speech is right at the heart of this. We read of the laws and government of the Nephites and the responsibility of carrying on their backs, their shoulders, this law of liberty. Because that's Christianity. And that says that, hey, you can go out and worship as you choose. They have their own First Amendment, so to speak. You can go out and choose for yourself how you're going to worship and have your own beliefs. And we're not going to stop you from that. The problem always comes when they turn and they start persecuting the Christians. But on the other end of that, those that begin to persecute and become the dissenters, they want tyranny. They don't care about your beliefs. In fact, part of their movement in taking power from the Nephites and ruling over them is to remove their worship of Christ, to remove their religion. So that's easy. It's those that want the liberty, the pluralism, and believe that is a universal law, that it is a Christian law, that have the onus of supporting such a thing. It's a much harder thing to do. It's a much greater responsibility. So we get these conflicts and the wool is pulled off from our eyes as we see just how things really are and how fragile democracy and freedom are. As is oftentimes said, freedom of speech means nothing if you don't allow for speech that you don't agree with. And back to the Constitution and the First Amendment, we oftentimes talk about that First Amendment as freedom of speech. But first, before it talks about freedom of speech, it talks about freedom of religion. Those two things go hand in hand. And as we remove freedom of speech, we will lose freedom of religion. And of course, there's a growing percentage of people in positions of power that don't seem to really care. Thanks for listening.